Commander Ju Park stood at the bridge viewport, her reflection ghosted against the stars. Behind her, the crew of the Dauntless worked quietly at their stations, all aware of what was at stake. The message from the Chordates had arrived 3 days ago, and Ju had spent every waking moment since then weighing their options. The view screen flickered to life, revealing Ambassador Xorth of the Chordates. Its body rippled with patterns of blue and green light that played across iridescent skin stretched over a frame that seemed to bend in ways that hurt human eyes. 4 of its 6 limbs gestured in what humans had learned was a sign of amused condescension. Commander Park, the alien's translator, rendered its clicks and whistles into smooth, almost musical English. I trust you have considered our proposal carefully. Ju nodded once. I have, Ambassador. The Chordate's body shimmered with what the diplomatic courts had identified as their equivalent of a chuckle. And, does humanity accept our challenge, or will you continue to hide behind your borders, making grand claims about technology you dare not demonstrate? Lieutenant Minho, the communications officer, shot Ju a concerned glance. The Chordates were masters of getting under one's skin, perhaps literally, given their history of pranks that had caused diplomatic incidents across 3 sectors. Before I answer, Ju said, keeping her voice steady, I would like to hear the terms of this race once more. For the record, the alien's upper limbs waved dismissively. Of course. The terms are simple. 1 vessel from your fleet against 1 of ours in a race through the Callisto route. Ju raised an eyebrow. The Callisto route was notorious, a twisted path through 3 hazardous space phenomena that had claimed countless ships. It was exactly the kind of course the Chordates would choose. Dangerous, unpredictable, and requiring precise navigation. And the stakes. Ambassador Xorth's skin flushed deep purple, a sign of pleasure. If you win, humanity will be granted full passage rights through Chordate space for the next 1,000 years. No tolls, no inspections, no delays. The bridge crew tried not to react, but Ju heard a few sharp intakes of breath. Chordate space lay directly between Earth's colonies and the resource-rich systems of the galactic core. For decades, human ships had been forced to take long detours around Chordate territory or pay exorbitant fees for passage rights that came with humiliating conditions. And if we lose? Ju asked, although she already knew the answer. If you lose, the ambassador's body rippled with mirth. Humanity must publicly acknowledge that your claims of 7th-dimensional engineering are false. You will surrender all patents and research related to this technology to the Chordate Consortium. Captain Sunwoo, who had been quietly observing from his command chair, stood up. Ambassador, you're asking us to risk everything our scientists have worked on for the past 50 years. The aliens' limbs moved in what humans had learned was their equivalent of a shrug. High stakes make for an interesting game, do they not? Besides, if your technology is as advanced as you claim, surely you have nothing to fear from our challenge. Ju exchanged a glance with the captain. They both knew what accepting would mean. The 7th-dimensional drive was humanity's greatest achievement, the breakthrough that had allowed them to fold space in ways no other species had managed. But it was also their most closely guarded secret. The principles were known, but the practical implementation had never been revealed outside Earth's borders. The race would be observed by representatives from the Galactic Council, the ambassador continued, to ensure fairness. No weapons, of course. This is a test of technology, not martial prowess. When would this race take place? Ju asked. In 14 standard days. Enough time for you to prepare your finest vessel and crew. Ju thought of the Quantum Folly, still in its testing phase back at Earth's orbital shipyards. The prototype 7th-dimensional vessel that Engineer Do-Yun had been refining for the past 3 years. It wasn't ready for a full demonstration, but perhaps it was ready enough. Why now? Captain Sunwoo asked. After decades of restricting our access, why offer this opportunity? The ambassador's skin rippled with colors that the translation software couldn't interpret. Let's just say that certain members of our consortium have grown. Curious about the truth behind human claims, our scientists insist that stable seventh-dimensional matrices are theoretically impossible within the confines of a starship. We wish to settle the matter once and for all. In other words, Ju thought, they believe we're bluffing and want to prove it publicly. And this is the only way we can gain passage rights through your territory, she asked. The only way, the ambassador confirmed, its skin now pulsing with shades of red and orange. Unless you wish to continue your long journeys around our space for another century or two, by which time, who knows what technological advances our own engineers might make. The implied threat wasn't subtle. The Chordates believed humans were lying about their technological capabilities. If they were right, humanity would lose its one advantage in the ongoing power struggle of the galactic community. Ju looked at the faces of her crew. They had all suffered the indignities of Chordate harassment during previous missions. Human ships were routinely stopped, searched, and delayed. Human crews were mocked and treated as inferior. The Chordates had turned xenophobic comedy into a governmental policy. Before I give you our answer, Ju said, I need clarification on one point. The Callisto route includes passage through the Nix Nebula, the Schrödinger Straits, and the Paradox Prism, correct? Indeed, the ambassador's body language showed surprise that she knew this. You have studied our stellar cartography well. The Nix Nebula interferes with standard propulsion systems. The Schrödinger Straits create quantum uncertainty issues for navigation, and the Paradox Prism distorts space-time in ways that make conventional travel almost impossible. The ambassador's skin flickered with what might have been amusement. These are the challenges that make the race interesting, Commander. If you feel your technology is not up to the task. I didn't say that. Ju interrupted. I merely wanted to confirm the course. She turned to Captain Sunwoo, who gave her a subtle nod. Ambassador Xorith, Ju said, squaring her shoulders, on behalf of the United Earth government, I accept your challenge. The alien's skin rippled with bright patterns of yellow and green, surprise and delight. Excellent. We shall prepare the course and inform the Galactic Council. In 14 days, we will settle this matter once and for all. As the transmission ended, Ju turned to face the captain. Sir, we need to contact Earth immediately. The quantum folly is our only hope of winning this race. Captain Sunwoo nodded grimly. And if it's not ready? Ju looked back at the stars where Chordate space lay beyond, blocking humanity's path to the galactic core. Then we just gambled the future of human space travel on a ship that's still in testing. But I don't think the Chordates gave us much choice. The captain's expression softened. For what it's worth, Commander, I think you made the right call. We've been pushed around by those cosmic jesters for too long. Ju nodded, hoping his confidence wasn't misplaced. In 14 days, they would either open the stars to humanity or lose their greatest technological secret to a species that had turned mockery into an art form. The quantum folly hung suspended in its specialized dock, a marvel of human engineering that belied its somewhat mocking name. From the outside, it looked almost ordinary. A sleek vessel roughly the size of a pre-space age destroyer, with clean lines and minimal external features. This understated appearance was intentional. The ship's true innovations lay beneath its unremarkable hull. Chief Engineer Do-Hyun Kim stood on the observation platform, arms crossed over his chest, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth as he watched the final preparations. Behind him, Commander Ju Park stepped onto the platform, her footsteps echoing on the metal grating. How's our girl looking? Ju asked, coming to stand beside him. Do-Hyun ran a hand along the railing, his eyes never leaving the ship. She's ready to show the galaxy what humanity can do. Are you sure? Ju's voice betrayed her concern. The last test flight showed some instability in the dimensional matrix. Do-Hyun turned to face her. We fixed that. Triple-checked the calculations, reinforced the containment field. The problem was in the way we were modulating the quantum foam. We were trying to push too hard into the 8th dimension. I thought that was the whole point, pushing beyond known dimensions. The engineer shook his head. The point is control, not just access. The chordates think we're bluffing because their scientists can't stabilize anything beyond the 6th dimension. They get glimpses of the 7th, but can't maintain a stable field. Ju nodded slowly. And we can. We can, Do-yeon confirmed, turning back to the ship. The quantum folly doesn't just peek into the 7th dimension. It exists there, partially. That's what they don't understand. A technician approached them with a tablet. Do-yeon reviewed the readouts quickly, nodded, and signed off on the final checks. The technician smiled nervously and hurried away. Everyone's on edge, Ju observed. They know what's at stake. Do-yeon led her toward the boarding ramp. It's not just about passage rights anymore. It's about respect. As they walked along the dock, workers and engineers paused to watch them pass. Many offered nods or quiet words of encouragement. The news of the challenge had spread quickly throughout Earth's colonies. For years, humans had endured the chordates' mocking attitude and restrictive policies. This race represented a chance to change that dynamic forever. The ship's main airlock opened as they approached. Inside, the vessel hummed with activity. Unlike the exterior, the interior of the quantum folly was anything but ordinary. The corridors curved in subtle ways that seemed to lead the eye in unexpected directions. Lighting panels glowed with a soft, blue-white radiance that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I'll never get used to how it feels in here, Ju said quietly. Do-yeon nodded in understanding. That's the dimensional bleed. Your brain is trying to process spatial relationships that don't quite follow normal rules. They made their way to the engineering bay, where a team of specialists worked around a central column that pulsed with swirling patterns of light. The heart of the ship, the dimensional drive that had taken humanity decades to perfect. Is this your first time seeing it powered up? Do-yeon asked. Yes, Ju admitted. I've reviewed all the specs and simulations, but nothing compares to seeing it in person, he finished for her. The column appeared to stretch upward into infinity, despite the fact that they could clearly see the ceiling above it. Patterns of light flowed through it in sequences that seemed both random and perfectly ordered. That's the 7th dimension you're looking at, Do-yeon said with pride. Or rather, that's what happens when 7th dimensional space intersects with our normal 4 dimensions. It's beautiful, Ju whispered. And useful, added a voice from behind them. They turned to see Lieutenant Hannah Lee approaching, datapad in hand. The final crew assignments are complete, Commander. Hannah was to be Ju's second-in-command for the mission. Though young for her rank, she had proven herself exceptionally adept at working with the unusual navigation systems required by 7th-dimensional travel. Any issues with the volunteer list? Ju asked. Hannah shook her head. Just the opposite. We had to turn away dozens of qualified personnel. Everyone wants to be part of this mission. The chance to finally show up the chordates is a powerful motivator, Do-yeon observed. It's more than that, Hannah said. Most volunteered the moment they heard the chordates were involved. This crew has history with them. Bad history. Ju wasn't surprised. Nearly every human who had ventured into space had some unpleasant encounter with the chordates to recount. Their practical jokes ranged from merely annoying to genuinely dangerous, and their official policies toward human ships were designed to humiliate and inconvenience. Well, their enthusiasm is good, but make sure everyone understands this isn't about revenge. Ju cautioned. We need cool heads and steady hands. Understood, Commander. Hannah nodded. I've scheduled the final briefing for 800 tomorrow. All systems checks will be complete by then. Good. I want everyone to get a full night's rest before we depart. The race might not start for another 3 days, but we'll need that time to reach the starting point. Do-yeon led them deeper into the ship toward the bridge. Unlike conventional vessels, the Quantum Follies Command Center was located near its core rather than at the front. This positioning helped minimize the disorienting effects of 7th-dimensional operations on the crew. The bridge was a marvel of human-centered design. Curved workstations arrayed in a semicircle faced a central holographic display that could render data in ways that made intuitive sense to human perception, despite the sometimes counterintuitive nature of higher dimensional physics. "We've made some final adjustments to the interface," Do-Hyun explained as they entered. "The new algorithms should translate seventh-dimensional phenomena into visualizations that won't give you headaches after prolonged exposure." "That's thoughtful," Ju said with a small smile, "though I was looking forward to the usual post-shift migraine." "Very funny, Commander," Do-Hyun replied dryly. "But seriously, the improvements should help with precision navigation, especially through the paradox prism." Ju nodded and took a seat in the command chair, testing its feel. Around her, technicians were making final calibrations to various stations. "You know," she said quietly, "the chordates named those hazards deliberately to intimidate other species. The Nix Nebula, the Schrödinger Straits, the Paradox Prism. They're all meant to sound impassable. Psychological warfare by nomenclature," Hana observed. "Exactly. They think this is all a joke. But we're about to deliver the punchline." Ju stood up, her expression determined. "Do-Hyun, I want one final run-through of the seventh-dimensional fold procedure with the bridge crew before departure." The engineer nodded. "I'll set it up for this evening." "Good. And Hana, make sure everyone understands that what we're about to do hasn't just never been done before. It's been considered impossible by every other spacefaring species." "They know, Commander," Hana assured her. "That's why they volunteered." As the two officers left to attend to their duties, Ju remained on the bridge, gazing at the holographic display that currently showed a simulation of their planned route. The Callista route had claimed many ships over the years, but none of those vessels had been able to step sideways into dimensions that most species couldn't even perceive. "Not impossible," she murmured to herself, "just impossible for everyone else." The Quantum Folly drifted into position at the starting line, a solitary human vessel among the 5 chordate ships. The edge of the Helios sector made for a stunning backdrop, a curtain of newborn stars and swirling nebulae that painted the viewport with blues and purples. Commander Ju Park sat in the command chair, her posture relaxed but her eyes alert. Around her, the bridge crew performed their final checks with practiced efficiency. The atmosphere was tense but focused, each crew member acutely aware of what was at stake. "Status report," Ju said, her voice calm. "All systems nominal," reported Lieutenant Hannah Lee from the operations console. "Dimensional matrix stable at 87% capacity. Navigation systems calibrated and ready," added Helmsman Taho-san, his fingers dancing across his control panel. "Course to the first marker plotted." Chief Engineer Do-Hyun Kim's voice came through the comm system from engineering. "The 7th dimensional drive is in standby mode, Commander. Ready to engage on your command." Ju nodded, satisfied. "Remember everyone, we stick to the plan. Standard propulsion until I give the order." The external communication system chimed, and the holographic display at the center of the bridge flickered to life, showing the face of the chordate race marshal. Its iridescent skin rippled with patterns of authority. "Attention all vessels," the marshal announced, its translated voice booming through the bridge. "Final checks complete. Race will commence in 3 standard minutes." The display split to show the 5 chordate ships that would be their competition. Each was a marvel of alien engineering, sleek, predatory shapes with hulls that seemed to flow rather than remain solid. Their designs varied, but all shared the distinctive chordate aesthetic of organic curves and asymmetric proportions. "Quite the lineup they've brought," Hana observed quietly. "The pride of their fleet," Ju agreed. "Look at the 3rd vessel. That's a Vortex-class racer, supposed to be the fastest sub-FTL ship in 3 sectors." Taho snorted. "For now." Another window opened in the display, showing Ambassador Xorith. Its skin was pulsing with patterns that the translation software identified as amused content. "Commander Park," the ambassador said, "I must commend your courage in showing up for this race. Many in the consortium wagered that you would find some diplomatic excuse to withdraw. "We humans tend to keep our promises, Ambassador," Ju replied evenly. "Though I'm surprised you felt the need to bring 5 ships against our one." The ambassador's skin flickered with what might have been irritation. "Merely to demonstrate the various technological approaches our engineers have developed. After all, we wish this to be an educational experience for your species." "How thoughtful," Ju said, her tone perfectly neutral. "We look forward to the learning opportunity." Before the ambassador could respond, the race marshal's voice cut in again. "1 standard minute to race commencement. All vessels, prepare for countdown." The ambassador's image disappeared, replaced by a timer counting down from 60 seconds. "Are they scanning us?" Ju asked quietly. Hannah checked her readings, constantly. "All 5 ships plus the marshal's vessel. They're very interested in our propulsion systems." "Let them look." Do-Yun's voice came through the comm. "All they'll see is a standard fusion drive." "For now," Tahoe added with a small smile. The marshal's voice returned. "Racers, prepare for countdown. Remember, no conventional FTL drives until passing the first marker. Navigation through the Nix Nebula must be done using standard propulsion only." Ju exchanged meaningful glances with her bridge crew. This rule had been added specifically to disadvantage Earth's vessel, or so the Chordates thought. They assumed humans relied solely on brute force FTL technology, unaware that the 7th dimensional drive was something altogether different. "They have no idea what they're up against," Tahoe murmured, his fingers hovering above the dimensional control panel, ready to activate it the moment Ju gave the order. 10, 9, 8. The marshal's countdown echoed through the bridge. Ju took a deep breath. "Steady, everyone. Stick to the plan. 3, 2, 1. Begin." The quantum folly surged forward, its conventional thrusters flaring to life. But almost immediately, the Chordate vessels pulled ahead, their specialized propulsion systems giving them tremendous acceleration. The gap widened quickly, the sleek alien ships seeming to mock the human vessel as they raced toward the first marker. "They're fast," Hannah observed, watching the tactical display as the distance increased. "As expected," Ju replied calmly. "Maintain current speed." The ambassador's face appeared on the communication screen again, its skin patterns rippling with undisguised amusement. "Perhaps you should have brought a real ship instead of your theoretical toy, Commander. At this rate, you'll reach the finish line next week." Several of the bridge crew stiffened at the taunt, but Ju merely smiled politely. "The race is young, Ambassador. We're just warming up our engines." The ambassador's skin flashed with patterns that indicated laughter. "Oh, is that what you're doing? We thought perhaps your much-vaunted technology was malfunctioning, or perhaps it never existed at all." "We'll see you at the finish line," Ju responded, then signaled Hannah to cut the transmission. The Chordate ships continued to pull ahead, now nearly a full light minute in front of the quantum folly. They were approaching the edge of the Nix Nebula, a vast cloud of ionized gases and stellar debris that would mark the first real challenge of the race. "They're about to enter the nebula," Tahoe reported. "Estimated time to our entry, 6 minutes at current speed." Ju nodded. "Do-Yun, status of the 7th. Primed and ready, Commander. Matrix stability at 93%. "Excellent." Ju leaned forward slightly. "Let's wait until they're fully committed to the nebula. I want them confident." The minutes ticked by as the Chordate vessels entered the swirling gases of the Nix Nebula. Even with their advanced propulsion systems, their speed dropped significantly as they navigated through the dense, electrically charged particles. The nebula was notorious for interfering with sensors and propulsion systems, forcing ships to slow down and navigate carefully to avoid deadly pockets of radiation and gravity wells. "All 5 Chordate vessels now within the nebula," Hannah reported. "Their formation is spreading out as they navigate different paths." "And they're still watching us?" Ju asked. "Yes, Commander. Long-range scanners from both the Race Marshal's ship and the trailing Chordate vessel are locked on us. Juwu smiled. Perfect. Let them see this. She straightened in her chair, her expression shifting from polite patience to focused determination. Tahoe, reduce conventional thrusts to 20%. The helmsman looked surprised but complied immediately. Conventional thrust at 20%, Commander. The quantum folly began to slow noticeably, and within moments, the ambassador's face appeared on the screen again. Mechanical troubles, Commander. It asked with mock concern. Shall we send assistance? Juwu met the alien's gaze steadily. That won't be necessary, Ambassador. We're simply preparing for the next phase. She turned to Do-hyun on the engineering feed. It's time. Engage the seventh. The chief engineer nodded and began the sequence they had practiced dozens of times. Initiating seventh dimensional fold. Matrix energizing. A subtle vibration ran through the ship, not physical but somehow felt by everyone aboard. A sensation that seemed to touch something deeper than mere flesh. On the view screen, space itself seemed to shimmer, as if reality were a pond into which someone had dropped a stone. What are you doing? The ambassador demanded, its skin patterns showing confusion and alarm. Juwu didn't answer. Instead, she watched as the dimensional display showed the successful activation of humanity's greatest technological achievement. The quantum folly wasn't moving faster. It was reducing the distance it needed to travel by folding space-time through higher dimensions. Seventh dimensional fold established. Do-hyun reported, his voice tight with concentration. Holding stable at 40% capacity. Tahoe, Juwu said quietly, take us into the nebula. The helmsman grinned and executed the command. To an outside observer, the quantum folly would seem to blur slightly, becoming somehow less substantial, less defined. Then, without any visible acceleration, it simply appeared at the edge of the nebula. By the cosmic weave, the ambassador gasped, its patterns now showing stark disbelief. What trickery is this? No trickery, Ambassador, Juwu replied calmly. Just applied mathematics. As the quantum folly slipped into the nebula, moving through the hazardous gases with a grace that defied conventional physics, Juwu allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. The race had only just begun, but the first message had been delivered. The joke, it seemed, was on the Chordates. Deep within the swirling purple and blue gases of the Nix Nebula, the 5 Chordate vessels cut careful paths forward. Their sleek hulls gleamed as they navigated around pockets of radiation and microgravity wells with practiced precision. They maintained a tight formation, a testament to their pilots' skill in these treacherous conditions. Far behind them, or so they thought, the quantum folly drifted into the outer edge of the nebula. On its bridge, the atmosphere had shifted from tense anticipation to focused excitement. Full sensor sweep, Commander Juwu ordered, studying the main display where the nebula's dangers appeared as red clusters amid the swirling gases. Lieutenant Hana worked her console with quick, precise movements. Sensors functioning at 60% efficiency due to nebula interference. I'm detecting all 5 Chordate vessels approximately 7 minutes ahead of our position. Their current speed, Juwu asked. Reduced to 1/4 of their pre-nebula velocity, Hana reported. They're being cautious. Juwu nodded thoughtfully. As they should be. The Nix Nebula has claimed many ships over the years. Chief Engineer Do-hyun's voice came through the comm system from engineering. Commander, I've completed the final adjustments to the dimensional matrix. We're ready to proceed with the next phase. Excellent. Juwu leaned forward in her command chair. How stable is the matrix? Holding at 95%, Do-hyun replied. The nebula's electromagnetic properties are actually helping us maintain the field boundaries. Lucky us, Juwu smiled. Begin incremental power-up. Let's not rush this. In the engineering section, Do-hyun stood before the pulsing column of light that represented the 7th dimensional drive. Around him, his team monitored various stations, each focused on a different aspect of the revolutionary technology. Initiating power increase, he announced. 10%, 15%, 20% capacity. As the power levels rose, the column's light patterns changed, becoming more complex, more beautiful. Colors shifted in ways that human eyes struggled to process, suggesting movements and patterns that existed beyond the limits of conventional perception. On the bridge, helmsman Tahoe Song watched his controls with rapt attention. "I'm getting the dimensional feedback now, Commander. The seventh is responding." The ship didn't appear to accelerate in any conventional sense. Instead, the space around the quantum folly seemed to ripple, as if reality itself was being gently folded. To the crew, it felt like the universe outside was shifting rather than the ship moving through it. "We're approaching optimal fold configuration," Tahoe reported, his fingers dancing across the specialized controls. "Ready to execute on your command." Juwu took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth, the first real test of the seventh dimensional drive in competitive conditions. "Execute fold," she ordered calmly. Tahoe activated the sequence with practiced precision. The view screen showed the nebula ahead flickering slightly. And then, without any sense of acceleration or movement, the quantum folly was suddenly deeper within the nebula, having bypassed several kilometers of hazardous space in an instant. "Fold successful," Tahoe announced, unable to keep the excitement from his voice. "Position confirmed. We've moved ahead 17.3 kilometers. Any signs of instability in the matrix?" Juwu asked. "Negative," Hannah replied after checking her readings. "All systems nominal." Juwu nodded. "Good. Do-Yun, increase to 30% capacity and prepare for continuous fold operation." "Acknowledged," the engineer replied. "Increasing to 30%. Matrix holding stable." With each fold, the quantum folly jumped forward through the nebula, not by traveling through the intervening space, but by temporarily connecting 2 points in the fabric of reality. Unlike conventional faster-than-light travel, which still required a ship to cross every meter of distance, albeit at incredible speeds, the seventh dimensional drive simply reduced the amount of space that needed to be traversed. After several minutes of these controlled jumps, Hannah's console beeped urgently. "Commander, we're approaching the Chordate Formation," she reported. "Current position puts us approximately 2 kilometers behind our trailing vessel." "Are they aware of us yet?" Juwu asked. "I don't believe so. The nebula is interfering with their aft sensors." Juwu smiled. "Perfect. Tahoe, prepare for a 40% capacity fold. Let's pass them with style." 40% fold calculated and ready, the helmsman confirmed after a moment. "Do-Yun?" Juwu asked. "Matrix can handle 40%, Commander. But I recommend we limit exposure to less than 30 seconds at that level while we're still in the nebula." "Noted. Execute fold, Tahoe." This time, the ship's jump was more dramatic. The view screen image shifted more substantially, and suddenly the quantum folly was no longer behind the Chordate vessels, but in front of them, emerging from the fold directly in their path. The reaction was immediate. Alarm signals blared across the communication channels as the Chordate pilots scrambled to avoid the human vessel that had impossibly appeared before them. "What trickery is this?" demanded the lead Chordate pilot, its translated voice crackling through the bridge speakers. "You cannot have passed us." Juwu activated the external communication system. "No trickery," she replied calmly. "Just applied mathematics." "Impossible," the Chordate pilot insisted. "No ship can navigate the Nyx Nebula at such speeds." "We're not moving faster," Do-Yun cut in, unable to resist explaining. "We're reducing the distance we need to travel." The communication channel fell silent for a moment. Then Ambassador Xorith's voice came through, its tone no longer mocking but concerned. "Commander Park, the consortium demands to know what technology you are employing. This violates the spirit of the race." Juwu raised an eyebrow. "Does it? Your rules specified no conventional FTL drives through the nebula." "We're not using conventional FTL technology." "Then what are you using?" the ambassador demanded. Exactly what we claimed, Ju replied. Seventh dimensional engineering. The very technology you challenged us to prove. Another silence, longer this time. The quantum folly continued to move ahead, widening the gap between itself and the chordate vessels with each controlled fold of space. This cannot be real, the ambassador finally said. Our scientists have determined that stable seventh-dimensional matrices are theoretically impossible. Your scientists were wrong, Do-Yun responded simply. As the quantum folly approached the edge of the nebula, the next challenge of the race came into view on their long-range sensors. The Schrödinger Straits, a region of space where quantum uncertainty manifested on a macro scale, causing ships and objects to potentially exist in multiple states simultaneously. Conventional navigation through the straits was a nightmare. Ships had to move extremely slowly, constantly recalibrating their position as quantum effects caused reality to fluctuate around them. Some vessels had been lost entirely, their quantum state resolving in ways that left them partially phased into solid objects, or with critical systems existing in multiple incompatible configurations simultaneously. Schrödinger Straits approaching, Hannah announced. Estimated time to entry at current progression: 4 minutes. The chordate vessels had increased their speed, trying desperately to close the gap that the quantum folly had opened. Their advanced propulsion systems pushed to the limits as they exited the nebula in pursuit. They're going to burn out their engines at that rate, Tahoe observed. They're desperate, Ju replied. Their entire understanding of physics is being challenged. Do-Yun, what's our plan for the straits? The chief engineer's image appeared on a side screen. This is where the seventh-dimensional drive really shows its value, Commander. Rather than trying to navigate through the quantum uncertainty, we can shift slightly out of phase with conventional reality. Meaning? Ju prompted. Meaning we can bypass the quantum effects entirely by existing partially in the seventh dimension during our transit. The uncertainty principle doesn't apply the same way across dimensional boundaries. As the quantum folly approached the shimmering, distorted space that marked the beginning of the Schrödinger Straits, Ju could see the chordate vessels gaining slightly. They were pushing their ships beyond safe limits in a desperate attempt to catch up. They'll have to slow down once they hit the straits, Hannah pointed out. There's no way to maintain that speed through quantum uncertainty. Unless they've developed technology they haven't shared, Ju cautioned. Let's not get overconfident. Do-Yun, prepare the phase shift. Tahoe, plot our course through the straits as if we were navigating conventionally. We'll need that as a baseline. The communication system chimed again. The race marshal's image appeared, its skin patterns showing clear agitation. Commander Park, the consortium requests an immediate explanation of your vessel's capabilities. Several observers are suggesting that you may be employing prohibited technology. Ju met the marshal's gaze steadily. Our vessel employs seventh-dimensional engineering, exactly as we have claimed for decades. If the consortium wishes to inspect our technology after the race, we would be happy to provide a demonstration. After we win, Tahoe muttered under his breath. The marshal's skin flickered with patterns indicating deep confusion, but our understanding of dimensional physics suggests. Your understanding is incomplete, Ju interrupted politely. As this race is proving. As the quantum folly entered the outer boundary of the Schrödinger Straits, the view screen showed the bizarre visual effects that made this region famous. Light seemed to bend unpredictably. Stars appeared to duplicate and fade. And occasional flashes of energy sparked where quantum states resolved into new configurations. Initiating seventh-dimensional phase shift, Do-Yun announced from engineering. Matrix stable at 35% capacity. The effect was immediate and dramatic, while the strange phenomena of the straits continued to be visible on the view screen. They no longer affected the quantum folly directly. The ship glided forward at a steady pace, unhindered by the quantum fluctuations that would have forced any conventional vessel to crawl forward at minimal speed. Behind them, the chordate vessels reached the edge of the straits and immediately slowed to a near standstill, their advanced sensors trying to map safe paths through the quantum uncertainty. "They're watching us," Hannah reported, studying her console. "All their sensor arrays are focused on our ship." "Let them look," Ju said with quiet satisfaction. "It's time the galaxy learned what humanity has actually achieved." As the quantum folly moved smoothly through the heart of the Schrödinger Straits, the chordates and other observing species throughout the galaxy were forced to confront a new reality. Humans hadn't been bluffing about their technological achievements. They had mastered aspects of physics that other. Helmsman Tahoe Song turned in his chair to face the commander. "We've essentially won already. Even if we took the conventional route through the prism, they couldn't catch us." Ju smiled slightly. "This was never just about winning, Tahoe. It's about demonstrating what human technology can truly do." She activated the internal comm system. "Do-Yun, are we ready for the final phase?" The chief engineer's voice came through clearly. "Ready, Commander. The matrix is fully stabilized and prepared for maximum capacity. Any risks I should be aware of?" There was a brief pause before Do-Yun answered. "Theoretical ones only. We've never tested the system at full capacity outside of simulations." Then today, the journey through the prism took both an instant and an eternity, a paradox in itself. As the ship approached the far boundary, Do-Yun began the process of resolving their quantum state. "Beginning dimensional collapse," he announced. "Resolving to optimal configuration in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The myriad possible versions of the quantum folly collapsed into a single reality, the most favorable outcome from all the paths they had simultaneously traveled. The ship emerged from the prism in perfect condition, having navigated the impossible maze with elegant precision. "Dimensional collapse complete," Do-Yun reported, his voice now sounding normal again. "Matrix powering down to standard levels." "Position confirmed," Tahoe added, checking his instruments. "We're through the prism. Clean exit on the optimal vector." Jumu allowed herself a moment of triumph. Time to finish line. "At standard cruising speed, 17 minutes, Tahoe replied. "Take us home, helmsman," Ju ordered. "Standard propulsion from here. Let's give our observers time to process what they've just witnessed." The quantum folly proceeded at a leisurely pace to the finish line, a spatial marker orbiting a beautiful ringed gas giant at the edge of chordate space. As they approached, they could see a gathering of observer vessels from various species, including representatives from the Galactic Council. "We're being hailed by the race marshal," Hannah reported. On screen, Ju nodded. The chordate race marshal appeared, its skin patterns displaying a mixture of disbelief and formal politeness. "Commander Park," it began, its translated voice carefully neutral, "our sensors confirmed that you have successfully navigated the paradox prism in 17 minutes. "That is correct," Ju confirmed. "The previous record was 11 days, the marshal stated flatly. "We are at a loss to explain your achievement. As I said earlier, seventh dimensional engineering, exactly as humanity has claimed for decades." The marshal's skin flickered with unreadable patterns. "The consortium requests your permission to remain at the finish line to verify when you actually arrive." Ju smiled. "Of course, we'll be crossing the line in approximately 10 minutes. As the quantum folly passed the finish line exactly when predicted, the observation platforms erupted with activity. Representatives from dozens of species were frantically consulting instruments, arguing over readings, and attempting to make sense of what they had just witnessed. 3 hours later, the first chordate vessel emerged from the paradox prism, battered but intact. The others followed over the next 6 hours, each showing signs of the difficult journey they had endured. A formal reception was hastily arranged aboard the Galactic Council observation vessel. Commander Ju Park and her senior officers were escorted to a grand chamber where representatives from many species waited, all eager to understand what they had witnessed. Ambassador Xorith approached as Ju entered, its skin patterns subdued. Gone was the mocking demeanor, replaced by something that looked remarkably like respect. "Commander Park," it said formally, "on behalf of the Chordate Consortium, I acknowledge your victory. As agreed, humanity will be granted unrestricted passage rights through Chordate space for the next millennium." Juwu nodded. "Thank you, Ambassador. The United Earth government appreciates this recognition." The ambassador's skin flickered with what the translation software identified as curiosity. "If I may ask, how?" "Our most advanced scientists believed stable seventh-dimensional matrices were theoretically impossible. Humans have always been underestimated," Juwu replied simply. "While others focused on moving faster through space, we explored ways to make space itself cooperate with us. The seventh dimension isn't just another direction. It's a relationship with reality that allows for possibilities beyond conventional physics." The ambassador seemed to consider this, its skin patterns shifting through complex sequences. "The passage rights are yours, as agreed," it repeated. "But I must ask, why did you call your vessel the Quantum Folly? It seems an odd name for such an advanced ship." Juwu's smile widened. "Because the greatest jest of all is convincing a trickster that they're the only one with a sense of humor." For a moment, the ambassador remained still. Then its skin erupted in patterns that the translation software identified as genuine amusement, not mockery, but true appreciation. "Well played, human," it said. "It seems we have underestimated your species in more ways than one." News of the race spread quickly throughout the galaxy. The image of a human vessel accomplishing what had been deemed impossible changed perceptions overnight. The species that had been dismissed as technological pretenders was now recognized as having mastered science that others had barely theorized. As Commander Juwu Park stood on the observation deck of the Quantum Folly that evening, watching the stars that would now be freely accessible to human ships, she felt a quiet pride. Humanity had proven itself not through threats or violence, but through understanding the deepest nature of reality itself. The seventh dimension had been humanity's secret all along, and they had revealed it with perfect timing, turning the cosmic joke back on the jesters themselves.